The narrative of the gnosis continues to be one of the more sidelined main plots in Genshin, where in the beginning we are told that these mysterious artifacts are supposed to be the evolved forms of a vision and the connection of the Archons to Celestia. Nowadays, it's just another throwaway callback that seems to be passing hands without any real weight. The gnosis have taken a backseat amidst everything happening in the story, so much so that even the Archons aren't bothered with their alleged boost in power being taken away from them. But what if this was intentional? Could there be a reason that the Archons are so ready to part themselves from the gnosis? And what if the Archons are supportive of the plot for a new world order against Celestia? Disclaimer: this is all just a theory and speculation, and none of it is indicative of the final product. This theory stems from a long line of questioning of why aren't people really focused on the gnosis. But before we begin with the Archons themselves, we have to ask about the Tsaritsa and the Harbingers. The Harbingers and the Tsaritsa aren't too secretive with their ultimate goal of establishing a new world order through their own mysterious means. The Fatui Harbingers are politicians first before they are warriors, and have actively interfered or assisted in the plans of the other nations. But the main goal of the Tsaritsa's Harbingers is to prepare themselves for an ultimate war against the common enemy, and to even unite the entirety of Tevat as ordinary humans against a long fight. However, while the Fatui Harbingers are questionable people and sometimes downright criminals, them advocating for peace through unification may not be out of left field. Besides Venti, their methods for getting the gnosis were done through trading, so it isn't too far-fetched to theorize that the Tsaritsa would enlist the help, or at least the silence, of the other seven in not intervening on her plans regarding the gnosis. So the next question is, which of the Archons would have the most motivation to actually plot against Celestia, or at least silently support the Tsaritsa's way? If there was one god that would be the most privy to the lawfulness and strictness of Celestia's ideals, it would be Zhongli. Let's begin with the one that's confirmed to have connections with the Tsaritsa already. We are told in the Liyue Arcade quest that Zhongli already made a contract with the Tsaritsa for her to aid him in his retirement and his final test of the Qixing and the Adepti. And for that contract to be consented to, Zhongli should have asked the Tsaritsa about her motivations regarding his gnosis. The importance of the ideal of contracts is that consent is formed through the knowledge and risk acceptance of both parties, which is why a contract cannot be broken or forced. Zhongli is the oldest among the 7 Archons, hence he has both more wisdom and cynicism regarding Celestia. He knows the deeper secrets behind the visions, and even what happened to the Abyss sibling. He also knows that his erosion is amongst his contracts with the heavenly principles, and it's because of this pre-existing knowledge that could have contextualized deeper why he allowed for the Tsaritsa to take his gnosis in exchange for his retirement. I do believe that Zhongli wouldn't be too pressed if there was a creation of a new world order, as long as it didn't jeopardize the people of Liyue. But after seeing what had happened with past civilizations, because of Celestia's numerous verdicts for war, Zhongli may have considered that establishing a new world may be the right way to maintain Liyue's prosperity without the interference of the heavenly principles. Zhongli has also come to terms that the era of divinity is now long gone, and perhaps that also extends to his thoughts regarding the Harbinger's uprising. If the heavenly principles were to be removed, is there a chance that humanity will finally be the sole determinants of their fate? Zhongli is a god that has lived among the humans for a very long time, even before his formal retirement. So personally, I theorize that because of this careful consideration, he could believe that Tsaritsa's plan with his gnosis is a good enough gamble for Liyue's prosperity. Out of all the Archons, I genuinely believe that he is the one that would be the biggest supporter of the Tsaritsa's plans, or at the very least, the most knowledgeable. Venti is a difficult character to discuss. He is an enigma amidst all of the other Archons, and a wild card that seems jovial and happy, but knows more than he lets on. However, what distinguishes him from Zhongli is that he wasn't present consistently enough to really have a grasp on the situation. From what we know allegedly, Venti has been asleep for intermittent periods of time because he wished for Mondstadt to rule freely without intervention from an Archon. The gaps between these rests are unknown. However, his current reawakening was recent enough that the name Storm Terror was unfamiliar to him. He also apologizes to Dvalin for his absence before the Traveler intervened. So for him to collude with the Tsaritsa before the stealing of the gnosis is impossible, and Venti asks what she could have been planning in those 500 years he's never seen her. He also couldn't believe that she would plot to steal another god's gnosis, which does put the scene into perspective if Venti was really trying to resist against Senora. But in my opinion, this was already an attack that he foresaw and that he allowed. In the earlier part of the Archon quest, Diluc and Jean are wondering what is the point of the Fatui's goal in mingling with the Storm Terror affairs. Venti states that the Fatui aren't interested in Dvalin's power, but instead were using the dragon to draw out the god of Animo himself. Therefore, it's possible that he had a hunch that this was going to happen, that he himself was going to be the target. But why I believe that Venti supports Tsaritsa's plan is because he somewhat empathizes with her plight, despite being surprised and maybe even betrayed that Tsaritsa would actually execute her plans. He mentions that he was once close with her prior to the Cataclysm, and he'd even impersonate her staff or write tales about her during the performances he has as a bard. Perhaps it was also through this closeness with her that made him reconsider how such a gentle soul could be pushed to retribution. Venti is an empathetic character, and also understands Celestia is not the beautiful paradise that the legends make it out to be. This could also be deepened by the fact that Venti is a thread of 1,000 winds, and has direct connections to one of the shades of the usurper, Istaroth. Venti himself is interwoven into the foundational principles that created Teyvat, and maybe that could help him realize why the foundational principles have done more harm than good. Nahida challenging Celestia is not something that I was considering until I really understood her positionality. Nahida is a god that is not loyal to Celestia due to her not completely understanding her past, and is a blank slate whose motivation is to seek out the truth as the god of wisdom. This is what led her to seek out what happened with Sumeru and forbidden knowledge. Unlike the others, Nahida is more lax when it comes to Celestia, and understands them as nothing more than a concept or a point of discussion. This could also be rooted in Sumeru's lore itself, where forbidden and exotic knowledge are freely shared with little to no regard of the repercussions. Perhaps this is also reflected with Nahida. Nahida has also not been opposed to using her divine powers as a bargaining chip for the sake of knowledge, and also has not been against using the Irminsul for her own personal purposes, such as helping the travelers scour information that could otherwise be considered illegal. Which is why I believe that much like her capacity for trading the two gnosis for information, she would not be opposed to assisting the Tsaritsa if the knowledge and protection she would garner for her people is of equal value. But another aspect is her genuine curiosity and concern regarding the ancient civilizations of Sumeru. This is evident with her interaction with the Dendro dragon Apep, one of the original sovereigns. Because of this, I believe that if Nahida were to collude against Celestia, it would be because of the usurpation of the original gods and her want to understand the descendants who came here from years ago. And maybe her concern for Apep is honest and genuine, and could even lead her to a path similar to Fossilor. Nahida's priority is not only to protect her people, but also understand the truth of the world. And perhaps the Tsaritsa and her Harbingers are the key to Nahida's end goal. Because not only do they have an extensive collection of knowledge about divine matters grander than the Irminsul, but they have also found something worthy within the Gnosis that they're willing to take it from the gods. Farina as a character would be virtually absent from this conversation as, at the moment, she is taking her very well-deserved break from centuries of anguish. So this decision will be for Neuvillette. On one hand, I want to think that Neuvillette would support the notion of a new world order if and only if it is for the betterment of Fontaine and as a form of justice against the foundational principles that stole away his kind's power. Neuvillette already mentions that it is by his authority as a fully fledged dragon of water that he must fulfill his oath and obligations, even if it means returning the waters of this world back into the heavens. Neuvillette has not shown signs of being directly opposed to using the divine's powers and authorities against the usurpers. Furthermore, discussing with the Tsaritsa would give him the benefits of understanding what the Gnosis are, and how he personally has remnants of the alleged third descender. And lastly, it is within Neuvillette's obligations to finally judge the usurper king, and the very foundational principles that have changed the land of humanity. However, the caveat here, if he was to agree with the Tsaritsa, or at least to show his support, is that he must assure the safety of Fontaine. While Neuvillette is not opposed to a physical altercation if he must, he would rather not jeopardize the people's safety. The great war that the Harbingers are plotting will burn the entirety of the world away in favor of a new one, and that leaves the question of where would Fontaine be after all of this? There is also no guarantee that the Harbingers will win against the common enemy, which could plunge all of Seven Nations into severe divine punishment if the foundational principles deem them unworthy. The second is that Neuvillette would be willing to collaborate with someone who he considers as a usurper. If his goal was to judge all of the seven, that also means that the Tsaritsa is amongst the list. So the question is, how willing is Neuvillette to contribute to a plan like that, especially to a god that has questionable motives? In my opinion, Outside of just not knowing the current situation around the Tsaritsa and the gnosis due to Ei's isolation for several years, I believe that she would be actively against any kind of intent of usurpation and New World Order. Ei's relationship with the gnosis is seeing it as nothing more than a tool, meaning her relationship with Celestia wasn't one built with genuine loyalty or strength. But Ei's purpose for the Sakoku decree was out of her genuine fear that should Inazuma prosper the way that it does, it would fall to the hands of the heavenly principles similar to Conria. And her colluding with the Harbingers to plot against Celestia may be seen as a betrayal of her obligation as the Electro Archon. The risk here in directly involving herself in a plot against them would be Inazuma's direct targeting. However, one motivation that she could have for assisting in the plot against the Heavenly Principles is not only for the sake of Inazuma, but also in consideration for her sister's words. The vision that they have for Inazuma is for it to be free from the clutches of the Heavenly Principles, much like how the sacred Sakura blooms from the darkness. They both simply want the eternal prosperity of Inazuma, and the Heavenly Principles are a hindrance to that goal. So, would Ei be willing to risk everything to allow the Tsaritsa to continue onto this path, even if it means risking Inazuma be caught in the crossfire? We were already told in the Inazuma Archon quest that whatever the goal the Fatui has does not allegedly impede in her vision, so perhaps she already has an idea. Now the most important question here is why? What is the overall point of agreeing with the Tsaritsa if the Harbinger's intention is to burn the old world away and wage war? If anything, the risks are very, very high, even if you say that they are just being ignorant or silent about the whole situation. We know that that doesn't fare well with Celestia, and even if you're not involved, you are. It's also important to consider that the Harbingers are also morally ambiguous and powerful people. They're not completely to be trusted, so the risk that the Archons would be taking is relatively massive. So what makes it all worth it? Well, there's three main reasons why I believe that the Archons would be motivated to take that risk. First is just a genuine survival of their people. While Conria fell because of their own insolence and ignorance, we don't know what happened to the other civilizations that were simply caught in the crossfire. The hundreds of civilizations that questioned the gods, or who met their end with a nail. And Kanamiya, for example, was simply punished for taking refuge in the Dark Sea in the time of a war. Or the people of Salvindignir who met their end with a nail, but we have no idea what they did to warrant such a punishment. Another reason would be that the gods would be colluding with the Harbingers is to finally free themselves of their obligations and their erosion. Some Archons don't even want their responsibility anymore. Some are slowly losing themselves and their memories. And some have no true motivations to be loyal to Celestia. And maybe, with the last reason, is just a genuine guilt and their personal belief in justice. The power of the gnosis that the Archons possessed was ill-gotten, and a product of not one, but 2 wars. So it's possible that some Archons are willing to part with the gnosis because of all the pain that it caused in the past. And perhaps simply giving away that gnosis is a way for them to make amends for Celestia's history. There are crucial risks and repercussions if an Archon, or at least a god or a reigning sovereign, would be involved in a plot like this. First, if they were to succeed, who would be in control? While the 7 nations are under the clutches of the Heavenly Principles, there is a reason they are called the fundamental principles to Devat's existence. What happens when you shatter that security? And is the New World Order of the Harbingers truly for the betterment of the people? Or perhaps maybe it's just another iron grasp similar to the Heavenly Principles? Are the Archons really making the right call by allowing the Tsaritsa to have control over the gnosis? And then, what happens to the Archons when this is all over? We know that for a divine authority to be returned from whence it came, the Archon must perish through divine means. If the gnosis are connected to the divine authorities, and the Tsaritsa would do something drastic, and maybe even on the same level as Fossilor's sacrifice, what would that entail for the other Archons that gnosis is tethered to? And of course, the biggest repercussion is what happens if they lose. The Heavenly Principles have been known to punish creatures that directly defied their obligations, and history has told us of multiple accounts where divine envoys were punished for giving humanity knowledge and power. Just because they are the Archons, or just because they are gods, does not exempt them from this punishment. If anything, it puts a bigger target on their back if this all goes south. So who is to say that Celestia wouldn't see this as a form of uprising against them and punish everyone in Tevat? Even those that are not directly involved. Well, that's a story for another day. The Archons plus Neuvillette plotting against Celestia is definitely an interesting question. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the Archons simply just don't really care about the Gnosis? Do you think they're scared of the Harbingers? Or do you think that they actually support the Tsaritsa's goals for creating a new world order? My name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Bye-bye!